DeathsStalker here. Another weekend, a surprisingly warm day in November for me, and another MotoGP race. And this is Valencia 1, or I believe it's called the Grand Prix of Europe. Well, there was a lot of action happening before the race weekend even started. Now, the first thing was the odyssey of Valentino Rossi. As you know, he's been away for the last couple races because of COVID, and he went to get a test, and it came back positive, which didn't make any sense because it's been 2 weeks, which is how long it normally takes for you to be, you know, cleared. So we talked to the doctors, and they suggested go some other place, and he did. And they said he doesn't have COVID. So now he had a clear test. He had to have another one within 48 hours before he'd be allowed to attend the race. And he got that test, and that one came up clear. So now he was allowed to come to the MotoGP race. Unfortunately, it meant he was going to miss free practice 1 and 2 on Friday. So, American Gerloff, who I think right now is racing World Superbike, which is finished for the season, he got a chance to come ride Valentino Rossi's MotoGP bike in cold, damp, rainy conditions, and surprisingly did a pretty good job. And Valentino, of course, showed up on the Saturday to take over. So that was the first part. Now the second part, another MotoGP racer racing for the I believe the Tech 3 KTM team. I'll put his name up here. His brother was exposed to COVID, so he could not come to the race, and he is probably going to miss. He missed this race, and he's probably going to miss the next race. So as the world turns, and then in the Yamaha, the monster Yamaha factory team. What the hell's... bunch of the technicians all tested positive for COVID, and so these guys had to head back to the hotel and isolate, and that would come into play into the events that would happen later on this race weekend. Now, Marc Marquez, of course, still no show, no word on what's going on. Everything else is pretty much as you would like it. And then there was the problem with Maverick Vinales. Had to open up a 6th engine for his bike. As you know, he's had problems with his the Yamahas blowing up and whatnot, which meant he now had to start the race from the pit lane. So he was not a happy camper, understandably well. But then the bombshell dropped, and Yamaha got nailed for cheating in MotoGP. Now, I'm not going to go into it here because this is a long odyssey, and I will be doing a video that shows up on Thursday was explaining exactly what's going on here. But needless to say, Yamaha was, you know, not happy because they guessed that they knew they screwed up, and the other teams, especially Ducati and Suzuki, were very unimpressed. So now let's go talk about the actual racing. Valencia, normally the last race of the season. The MotoGP calendar is, the weather's kind of usually cold and sketchy. We've had rainstorms, we've had weather where you're walking around with toques and parkas trying to keep warm, and very seldomly do you ever get nice warm weather. And on Friday, they didn't get it. It was cold and wet and damp and just absolutely miserable. It was just not a pleasant experience. A few people crashed, a lot of people crashed in the other classes, but it was just a miserable day. On Saturday for qualifying, it was sort of rainy, then sunny, and the weather sort of cleared. And much to the surprise, the MotoGP guys, they actually got a dry session for qualifying. And you know, Fabio not finding a good setup, didn't qualify all that good. But Paulo Espargaro for KTM, they found something that worked, and he got on the pole. And then Alex Rins was second, and Taka Nakagama was third. Valentino Rossi, simply because he only had like one practice session in the damp in the morning, and then free practice 4, didn't really have a setup, so he qualified way down in I believe it was like 16th place or 17th place. Everyone else seemed to be doing okay, you know, sort of qualifying more or less where you think they were, but it looked like it was going to be an interesting race. Jean Muir, the guy who I believe is the current points leader for the World Championship, I believe he qualified on the second row, like either 4th or 5th. And Cal Quinto, Alex Marquez, they had problems, so they didn't actually end up where they had hoped to be, but overall it looked like it was going to be a nice race. Now fast forward to Sunday, we're now the race weekend, and surprisingly the weather was the nicest it had been all weekend. It was actually warmer than it had been all weekend, and the weather had been sort of drying the track. So the track had some few wet patches, but by the time the MotoGP guys, geez, I like people burning brush, eh? Whew. The MotoGP guys actually had a pretty dry track. There was a wet patch going into turn 1, and the guys have been trying to clear it out, to get it to dry it out, but it was seemed to be fighting them tooth and nail. So when they went for the actual race, there was a damp patch in turn 1, but the rest of the track was pretty well bone dry. So the people all lined up for the start. Maverick peeled off, went down the pit lane to get at the end of the pit lane for the start for him, and they had a start. And Paulo Espargaro got a pole shot. Alex Rins right behind him. Taka was right behind him. A few laps it only took for Jean Muir to get past Taka, and everyone was sort of following along. And then Fabio Quartararo and Aleix Espargaro were going into one of the corners, and Aleix overcooked the front wheel and slid off. And he was on the outside of Fabio when this happened, and it sort of startled Fabio, and he did the exact same thing and fell off. So Fabio actually was able to pick his bike up. Oh, that's a nice bit. Was able to pick his bike up, and a Ferrari. Wow. Was able to pick his bike up and get back into the race, but he was dead last, and he finished, I think, second from last and in the points, but I'll talk about that in a little while. Aleix, I think, was out, and then a couple other riders. Cal Crutchlow got caught up in the draft with someone passing him, and when he got on the brakes, he was actually traveling faster than he expected, and basically locked up the front wheel and crashed out. Something that can actually happen. When bikes pass, you actually tend to get sucked along by the bike that you passed, or that passed you. And then Valentino Rossi, his bike just stopped. There was like no power. He said he had come out of the corner and got on the gas, and it was sort of like you could see there was no power, and then he sort of coasted to the next corner, and the M1 was not working. Now, it wasn't an engine failure. After the race, they talked to the Yamaha guys, and they think it was a fuel pump failure. Now, with most of the Yamaha crew and technicians out for the COVID thing, they were kind of short-handed, and stuff like that wouldn't normally have happened, I think, if it had somebody else is burning stuff. Wow, what a nice day. What would have happened was the technicians probably would have done checks on the bikes and replaced parts, but they weren't there, so the guys who were there were trying to do the best they could. So unfortunately, you know, that's the downside of when you run a team with the minimum number of people to do the job proper, and then someone's sick or whatever. Now, Brad Binder had to serve a long lap penalty in this race because of his irresponsible riding from the last race, where he took out Jack Miller, and he had done his long lap penalty, and he actually did an excellent job working his way back up. It helped that you had some people that crashed out. One of the guys who crashed out was Alex Marquez, who was actually doing fairly well. But what happened to Alex is exactly the same thing that happened to Cal Crutchlow. Alex had Dovey pass him on the main straightaway with a Ducati, and Alex basically got sucked into the draft and carried more speed into the first turn, locked up the front wheel, and went down. Now, luckily, he just missed taking out Dovey. That's how close it was, but you know, unfortunately, Alex ended up with a second DNF in a row. Now, Franco Morbidelli, who had been doing pretty well, he put on I believe it was a hard front and a hard rear tire, because that's what a lot of people were running this weekend. And he thought it was gonna, like, what happens is the softer tires you start losing tire near the end of the race, and he thought that tire would come in like around 7-8 laps to go, and he'd be able to like motor by everybody, but he just couldn't put enough heat into it, and he just kept falling further and further behind. So with Maverick running at the back of the pack because he had to start from the pit lane, Valentino's bike not working, Fabio crashing out, and Franco just, you know, not getting anywhere with the wrong tire choice. You know, I think it was pretty much probably one of the worst weekends Yamaha has ever had. Now, John Muir followed Alex Rins for quite a while. Eventually, Alex got past Paulo Spargo and was starting to pull ahead. And then what happened was John Muir realized he couldn't let Alex get away, so he you know, started getting really aggressive, and it only took him a few laps, and he got past pole and proceeded to chase Alex Rins down. So now you had a Suzuki 1-2, and John Muir was he was going to get excellent points, especially with Fabio far down at the back. So there was no need for him to really try to pass Alex Rins for the win. But you also have to remember, John Muir has not won a race this season. He had a chance of winning a race. Unfortunately for him, the the race he was in, it was stopped because of Maverick Vinales' massive brake failure. And so he had yet to win a MotoGP race, even though he was leading the championship. And it turned out that Jean Mir actually had a slightly better setup than Alex, and he was following Alex, and Alex made a slight mistake going in one of the corners. He went into first gear instead of second, so it caused his bike to run a little wide, and Jean Mir didn't need a second invitation, went inside of him and got by him, and as soon as he had clear road in front of him, he very quickly pulled away from Alex Rins. So there was no fight involved here. Jean Mir was in the lead, and it was going to stay that way. So the end result was you had an old classic car. You had Jean Mir taking the win, his first MotoGP win, and now has a 37-point lead in the championship. Alex Rins is now tied with Fabio for second in the championship. Fabio has more wins, so that's the reason why he's ahead. And then you had Paulo Spargo, who finished third, which makes, I think, the third or fourth podium for him in the last couple races, so he's quite happy. So it was a very interesting weekend, pretty exciting. Not as many crashes on Sunday, thank goodness. And we get to do it all again next weekend. So hopefully the weather will be nice, and we can come out and do this again next Sunday. So that's all I got. Watch for Thursday, where I'll have that video talking about Yamaha's cheating and what happened with that. And talk to you later. DeathsStalker signing off.